My name is Dick Welch. I'm a member of the Southminster Board of Directors and a former mayor. Today I'm sitting here with Ben Horak, who has been here from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about how Southminster came to exist, Ben.
I wasn't around when it's very beginning, but I've been told that it was sort of the first inspiration was in about 1980 when the Frank Vest, the rector of Christ Episcopal, from the pulpit, expressed that there ought to be a need for a retirement home for elderly people. So they decided that they'd have a joint venture between the two churches. It's Christ Episcopal on the one hand and Mars Park Baptist on the other. Incidentally, I always refer to that as an unholy alliance. But leadership in these in those two churches that were involved in this undertaking were really some of the big movers and shakers on the Charlotte marketplace. And in any event, as things went along, the joint group decided to purchase about 25 acres from Jimmy Harris. Jimmy Harris was the son-in-law of Governor Cam Morrison. And in any event, I think construction began right around December 1982, and at a time when the surrounding area of the 25 acres, which is in South Charlotte, was basically a bunch of cotton fields and maybe some other farm stuff. The head honcho was Tom Storrs, and he was, as you may recall, he was NCNB's CEO, and he was really the most single active person in helping to put this whole thing together and pull it off. So Tom Storrs put me to work, pro bono I might add, in organizing the Residents Association and writing the bylaws and working out the standing committees and that sort of thing. I don't know if I've said it before, but Southminster actually opened its door for the first residents to move in, and I think the exact date that we recognize is May 17, 1987, with a handful of residents. And Sassy and I, we actually moved into our duplex cottage number 23 on the East Campus on July 1, 1987, which means that basically I have been here at Southminster for 30 years. In my book, the most important single ingredient is a community atmosphere. And that jibed with the objectives and goal of Tom Storrs and his cohorts. So, and incidentally, because of that emphasis that was put on being a community, when I wrote the bylaws, most corporate bylaws provide for a president and a vice president. And instead, I provided for a mayor and a vice mayor because I thought it was more indicative of a community than the usual business president, vice president designation. There was a group of maintenance people, John Adams and Buddy, and then there was Andy. Their names at this juncture are not vital, but they were all from Lancaster, South Carolina, and they were all avid fishermen. So anyway, on one occasion, they gathered up all their fish and brought them that they'd caught, brought them to Southminster, and we had they put on a fish fry on the back loading dock of Southminster, and it was on a you-all-come basis. And And we had really a good rapport with those guys. And then there was another one that sort of makes me chuckle, that in the early stages there was a shortage of kitchen help. It hadn't really been put together yet. And so anyway, being to overcome the shortage of residents, fill the gap by volunteering to shuck the corn and string the beans and do a whole lot of other stuff. And then another one that was somewhat unique was when Hurricane Hugo hit in 1989. It cut off it resulted in a power shortage for the kitchen washers, and the resident ladies put on their aprons and volunteered to wash the dishes, which I've often chuckled on that because that helped the rest of us be members of the Clean Plate Club.
It seems as though the spirit of community exudes among employees as well as the residents here at Southminster.
Oh, it certainly did. You know, just take as an example our servers in our bistro and in our dining room that we call Promenade. We get to know these kids. This is really part of this community atmosphere business, and you get where we don't really view them as hired help. We consider them. They get to where they're our very good friends, and sometimes we have relationships with some of the individuals who carry over even after most of them are school kids, and the relationship carries on even after they left school and Southminster, and we'd keep in touch with them. Now that didn't go on with everybody, but it was a remarkable togetherness that was spawned by our relationship with them. Not incidentally, but importantly, on May 23rd, 2017, we're going to celebrate Southminster's 30th anniversary. And I must say that in my book, we've got a lot to celebrate.
And before we moved, we had some kind of funny experiences, at least I did. I came out real early one morning to meet the electrician out here. And as I came into the entrance hall, there was nobody there in the reception area. I saw these little gray-headed ladies walking around in their bathrobes. So I assumed that they had gotten off the wrong elevator and that they were in distress and that I could come save them and I would take them back upstairs. And so I said to one of them, "Are you lost? Can I help you get back to your floor?" And she looked at me and she said, "No, would you like to go swimming with us?" And they were on their way in to swim. And I thought, they're probably healthier and stronger than I am. So about 2 days later, I was still unpacking things, and I realized I needed my vacuum cleaner. Had a cute yellow vacuum cleaner, and I'd left it in the car. So I heard the dog walkers going by with the dogs, and it was early, and I thought, oh, people are up and around. I'll just run out to the car and get my vacuum cleaner. So I did, and I started back in with it, and everybody was friendly, and I was talking to the dog people. And about that time, one of the nurses going off duty came out, and she looked at me, kind of cocked her head a little bit, and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I don't have a dog to walk, so I thought I'd walk my vacuum cleaner." At which point she said, "Oh, dear, why don't we go back inside? I think if you walked it inside, it'd probably be better." And I thought, well, they've already figured me out, and they're hauling me upstairs at any moment in time now, so just be on the lookout. So that was within the first 3 or 4 days of Southminster. I realized that it was going to be a rollicking good time. one day I was upstairs coming downstairs, and I was walking by the promenade, and Salem Suba and his staff were having a staff meeting, and I heard whoever was in charge, and I was early into this at that point, so I don't know who it was, and I didn't recognize the voice, and I didn't stare, but I heard him say, "Let us pray." So I kind of stopped and bowed my head right there, and he said, "Dear Lord, help us to love these old people." And I thought, amen. We're going to pray about it and it's going to happen. So I treasure getting to know the staff. We've got a fabulous staff, really and truly. Every department seems to me to be thriving in a real positive way. And I see that because I work with them on committees, and I also work with them in daily life here. And to me, it's a wow factor here. And I've loved all the young people, like you, Abby, these young people who still young enough to be getting engaged and sharing their life with us a little bit. It's fun. That's just really fun. Living here has been a blessing, a wonderful experience, a lot of support. My husband's in health care, and in life you never know what's coming next, and that has been wonderful to be in a situation where he can be taken care of and I can still be very close to him and with him several times during the day. And, it's the kind of place here that you need to come to it before you need to come to it, if that makes sense.
I'm almost the new kid on the block here. We've been at Southminster now for 10 months. And prior to us coming here, we were members of the Compass Club. And one of our early activities here before we were even residents was working out in the exercise room. And that's where I re-met Dr. Harry Doherty. And our history goes back to 1970, when my dad had to have serious heart surgery and aortic valve replacement with the Sanger Group. And Dr. Doherty was part of the new structure of the Sanger Group, which then included Dr. Francis Robachek and Dr. Michael Mullen, and then, of course, our friend Dr. Harry Doherty. Harry Doherty did the surgery on my dad, and 47 years ago, this type of open heart surgery was really quite serious. And my dad did well, and it certainly bought him extra time. So always in both his recovery and the fact that we got to keep him longer, this special group of men, and particularly Harry Doherty, was really special and near and dear to us in our family. After we became members of the Compass Club and before we came here, I've known for more than 30 years that I have a heart condition. That's part of my inheritance from my dad, this aortic stenosis. So I knew that eventually I too would have to have an aortic valve replacement. But I thought that it was a few more years down the road. When encountering Harry from time to time, told him that I was going to have this surgery, and he talked with me about it, but wouldn't give any opinions or insight in present day medicine. He was going to let my present day cardiologists and surgeons take care of those issues. But he gave me a lot of encouragement, and it was special to me all over again to have this connection. Well, in going through my stuff, I saw some of my mother's stuff, and here was some of the records from 1970 that related to my father's surgery. And there was a letter in there that was I'm not talking about old-fashioned stuff. This is handwritten on a typewriter with the misaligned print and typos and all this, but it was instructions for my dad on his upcoming surgery as to what things he needed to have accomplished or in place prior to the surgery. And through this whole thing, this letter was over the signature, handwritten, Dr. Harry Doherty. So I returned this to Harry, and I think he now has that in his archives someplace. But it's certainly interesting that after 47 years, that letter would surface again. And so it's come back to Harry by way of the big circle route. And I have had several things occur already that really been cool. One of the people that I have befriended since coming here has been Horak. Because as it turns out, Ben Horak, the first house that he bought when he moved to Charlotte was the neighborhood that I grew up in. And his street was on my paper route. So I knew all the people in those neighborhoods because not only would I deliver my own paper route, but occasionally I would substitute for one of the other carriers. So I had several routes that I knew the name of every person in every house. Well, in talking with Ben and in connecting, we determined that we had been neighbors. Of course, I was a child of 14 and he was already in his young adult years. When Ben Horak had his 99th birthday this year, as a gift to him, I took him out and we went out in my car and we rode through the old neighborhood and all the neighborhoods that we had connected with. And we traded stories about who lived in that house. And Ben would talk about them from the standpoint of, yeah, that was Joe so-and-so. And I said, yeah, he was the father of my friend, and my childhood friend. So we had that experience that day, and we had a blast.
I guess we should say who we are.
You want to be first?
I'm Gail Grimm,
I'm Rosemary Micah.
And I'm Irene Kehoe.
and we have known each other how long?
Well, I have known both of you since 1966
Is that when you
when
came
I
back?
moved to Charlotte the first time.
Oh, okay.
And we all met at St. Gabriel's
Okay.
when St. Gabriel's had just a mere 200 families.
700 people
Oh my.
at the time.
And we had a bridge club, which we finally had to more or less disband because we're so old and decrepit we couldn't remember where we were meeting or what we were supposed to do. And back then, when we were much younger, we decided, there were 8 of us, that we would, when we got a little older or much older, that we would buy a house and all live together.
As couples.
Yeah, as
And,
couples.
yes.
And no, I don't think we were going to let the husbands come, were
Oh,
we?
I think we were.
Well, anyway, we didn't do it. But now there are 3 of us here at Southminster, and
2 at Plantation Estates, and 1 at the Cypress, and 1 in Chapel Hill
That's
at a
right,
retirement home.
so it's a good thing. We'd probably kill each other if we all lived together.
As our friend at the at Plantation said, we did buy a big house, but they're all different
Yeah.
big houses.
I can remember when Irene and her husband Marty had their 50th anniversary, and I'm pretty sure it was at your house. And there were 8 couples, or maybe 9 couples then. And when I got home, I told my daughter about these 9 couples, and it was your 50th, and everybody there had been married at least 45 years. And my sister said, well, did you call the newspaper? I said, what for? She said, Mom, that's unheard of to have that many people being married that long. You know.
Well, I recall when I had my 50th anniversary, the Bridge Club gave us a surprise party at your
And
house,
you almost
Gail.
didn't come.
And I thought I was on my
Yeah,
deathbed.
I remember. I'd
But,
forgotten that.
Gail, you called John and you
Yes,
said, be
you
sure
better."
that I'm better and we get
Yeah,
there.
and you did.
And it was a big surprise.
Oh,
It really
golly.
was.
You were after us to come out here to look anyway. This was not
That's
my
right.
first choice just because of the location. I feel like I'm out in the country because I'm a city girl, but I'm so thankful to be here. But you were after Irene and me both, too.
Irene, yes, because Irene kept saying how far it was. And,
Well, I had never been out this way.
but you were a member of Quail, and it's just around the corner from
Right.
Quail.
Yes, she is.
But we're happy we're all here
well,
together.
and when you were looking with your daughter, and I showed you, I went a lot of apartments because you wanted a big
Right.
dining room. And you called me from Florida and you said that you had gotten your apartment and you weren't sure where it was. And so you told me the number. I thought, that's right next door to me. And you said, no, it's not. But it is. It was right next door to me. St. Gabriel's is our background. That's how we got together.
right.
And I do want to mention, when I moved here, being Catholic, I wondered, how we were going to be accepted. And Doug Ulrich, who has been here, I don't know how long, he was here when I moved in with his wife. Edna Lou was alive at that time. And we just asked for him to do a little stuff, and the next thing we know, it's a real little chapel. So that's been a real blessing to have Doug being so kind to us. Well, I'm thankful to have y'all as friends, and I can't believe after all these years we're still
I know.
in the same place and happy to be here. And in fairly good health, so we're...
Well, yeah, we are.
So the whole idea, now that I was retired, was that Betty would love to live on a lake. Now, at this point, this is 87, our entire collection of grandchildren were here in Charlotte, and we got an opportunity to move to Lake Norman up at Westport. And Betty's mother and aunt, who had moved into a retirement home in New Jersey, said,
Go ahead. Do it.
And
find us a place too.
so our daughter, who's the mother of these grandchildren, found that Southminster was just under construction. And they moved in.
We moved in, and so did Mom and
They
Aunt
came
Flo.
before we did to North Carolina. They came in about February of 88, which was certainly in the first year of the founding of Southminster. And we came on down and moved in on Lake Norman.
But they
And so
enjoyed it here. They were both had several kinds of cards, bridge and other kind of cards they liked to play, and so did all their people they moved with. They had plenty of time to do that, and my mother was a fine pianist, and my aunt got a singing group going with her playing, and everybody else enjoyed that too. Got a chance to sing, so it was just, they just moved in and we're happy here.
Last Friday, I was Pontius Pilate in the production we put on, and I must say I've had more people talk to me about that than I think than anything at any time.
Tough role to play.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Not very popular.
Well, hey, I get everybody to hate me, and I've done my job, right?
That's right.
When I first came here, I thought, well, there's some things that I need to do because everybody seems to be involved in something. So I saw the garden. So I called Dwayne up. I said, I'd like to work in your garden. So he said, okay, fine. So one day I met him in the hallway, and he took my hand, and all of a sudden he grabbed hold, and he came real close to me, and I thought he was going to kiss me. But he said, I have laryngitis. We're going to have a meeting in about another week.
We've had a lot of good times out there.
You can see, I think we're about the two biggest characters on this campus.
We also, John Walsh and myself, are actually the two that work in the garden. We have a little 50-foot square garden, and in that 50-foot square garden, over the last 2 years, we have produced over a ton, 2,000 pounds of fresh organic vegetables. we give 80% of these vegetables to friendship trade, to people who are at danger of not having good food. Wait till I have a little water. And then we put 20% on our table. The garden grows, and I'm glad to have help, because before John came, I didn't have any real help. John, I'm gonna get a drink of water, and you may talk.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, what's your happiest memory at Southminster?
Mine,
Yeah.
having you come and help me, it's been John, it's just been overwhelming. No, I think one of the things that's really been good here is our association with South Mecklenburg High School next door. We helped build a greenhouse over there that's about 50 by 24 foot, and in that we actually grow all of our seeds and our plants from seeds. We start so that everything is grown in organic soil or fed organic food. And it's been a real godsend for us, and also for the few kids that come and we teach them about food. They have absolutely no idea where their food comes from. You know, to see a seed and then a plant, and then we show them an eggplant that comes from that microscopic almost seed, and it blows their mind.
About a year ago, I started going down to the bistro on Saturday mornings for breakfast. And right next to me was the loudest
Sat right by itself over the corner behind the bushes.
and the loudest crowd you ever saw was in the table next to me. And I found out it was a group of 8 that lived in the
West Campus.
cottages that used to come and gather together. And people always said, always get there before they do, because you never get your food on time. Well, anyway, they felt sorry for me, and they adopted me, and from then till now, I'm still a member of the Saturday Coffee Club.
Heard you say earlier that y'all like the bar here, and you got free drinks. That was a real shock to me when I came here. I found out that this Baptist sponsored organization, there were people here that drank and danced in front of each other. Now, I knew Baptists always drank, but I didn't know they did it in front of each other.
Well, I haven't seen much dancing over here. I've seen a lot of drinking.
Oh. There was a guy here named Orrin Finkler, and he said, Dwayne, I want you to look after my orphans. Orphans, not orchids. And I'm thinking, I don't know how many children or orphans he's got. And I said, well, you know, I need to talk to you about that. He said, well, just come on up. It's the door. And so we go up to a 2-bedroom apartment. And he's got 76 orchids inside, everywhere you could put one. On the windowsills, he'd even made hanging shelves with lights to put them on.
Took us 2 truckloads to get them over to South Meck.
Yeah, it takes John an hour to 15 minutes just to water. And since then, we've gotten probably 8 or 10 more. But we put out some beautiful flowers. And if you go over to their principals, to Dr. Furr's office, we have 12 orchids lined in there. And the parents that come in with their kids look at them and say, well, where'd all this come from? And they can say, we grew them right here in our greenhouse. It is a great facility.
Does any of this get edited out? It does? Okay. They had to put locks on both doors of the greenhouse? No? Okay. And that was because the kids were coming over there making out. They have cameras over there.
Yeah,
and my concern is...
when he says making out, what he means, they were boiling some flowers and some vegetables and stuff like that.
My concern is Some Saturdays and Sunday, Dwayne and I go over there by ourselves, and I'm afraid they're going to start talking about us.
Yeah, he is pretty suspicious fella.
And so, what impressed you most when you did move in with Mom?
Well, I guess the people impressed us the most. They were such an accepting group of people, and pretty progressive, and we found almost a family atmosphere here. It was a family atmosphere, and just we loved it from the very beginning. And then another interesting side to show how life is connected together in strange ways. I was ordained to the ministry 70-some years ago. First of all, I met the uncle of one of the members of my ordaining council, Dr. Orion Finkley. And later, I met the granddaughter of another member of my ordination council. Her name was Jenny Wright Wilson. And I just was interesting that you had those fascinating connections.
So your ministry sort of went with you after you retired
It
to
just
Southminster.
just natural.
Natural.
I love people, and I love responding to people. And Ed Lou's the same way. We both loved it from the day we moved in. It's just an exciting place to live.
I just noticed as your son is watching you and Mother here, your attitudes were always wonderful and positive about this place.
Well, that's what we felt about it.
Yeah, and you could tell, and it comes back to you through friendships and relationships. Yeah. Well, let me ask about a group that you know about. I'm not sure if they're still in existence, but the Grackles.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
The Grackles, that's an informal men's group that sings, and I think it was Tom Waller or somebody else insisted that I join. I said, well, I can't carry a tune. Says, that's all right, that doesn't matter. So I went to one of their concerts, came home, told Ed and Lou, I said, I think I found my group. I heard them sing, and it wasn't very musical. So I joined them. It still meets occasionally.
What's some advice that you'd give to people that are looking about coming here or newcomers once they get here?
I'd say keep an open mind. Keep your mind open to what's going on, and take a positive attitude toward the aging process. Try to make an adventure out of growing older. Instead of bemoaning the aches and pains, just turn it into an adventure.
And sort of living a day at a time.
And live it a day at a time, and develop a good sense of humor. And just stay open to new opportunities and new experiences. Don't die on the vine. Just stay as active as you can, as your health permits. I guess the funniest thing that ever happened was a couple moved out here. They loved each other, but they couldn't get along with each other. And they had separate apartments. But they still loved each other. And he what was his name? He owned that what do you call it? Dry cleaning place, little yellow house on.
Oh, I know. I can't remember his name, but I know what you're talking. It's not. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. South Park.
And his wife hated the farm, and he built her a house on the farm. But anyway, one time at the Halloween party, they dressed him up as a woman. For all the world, he looked like a woman. But Dean, yeah, that brings to mind Dean Minton. He was the only other preacher in our residence here. He lived here several years before he died. And he was talking with this man one time about the chapel, how we needed stained glass windows. And the man, I wish I could remember his name. Dean Minton said, $10,000. Pulled out a check, wrote for $10,000, gave Dean Minton for the stained glass windows. But they claim that he used to go out to Las Vegas and win some big gambles and come back and give it to the church.
How thoughtful. That's good.
But I visited his wife's apartment one Christmas, and there was her Christmas tree all decorated, beautifully decorated, but it was upside down. And she had cows, pictures of cows and objects made like cows all over the apartment. Wow. They were fascinating groups.
One funny memory I have about you from the residents telling me about you when they had the Olympics here at Southminster, and they had walking and they had the pool. What they have in the pool, not volleyball. Volleyball in the pool. And then they had Wii bowling or something where and the thing I remember about you is they said they'd let you carry the torch at the beginning and go around the whole building and through the building. And somebody said they came up to you and said, "Okay, Doug, would you like to let someone else help you with the torch?" You said, "No, I got it." So they couldn't take that torch away from you. You're having too much fun going around with the torch all over the Southminster. A lot of good experiences.
Oh, yeah.
My name is Hunnis, Pocahontas Bidgood, and I grew up in eastern North Carolina, a little town called Kinston.
And I'm Roland Elliott. Likewise, grew up with we might begin as we've talked. Hunnis and I were pushed in baby carriages together. So we have known each other very, very long time. We had a happy childhood. We did lots of things. We were talking about earlier. We were in grammar school together, high school. We went to camp together in the mountains. We took dancing lessons together. We took piano lessons, and we rode horses together. And are you going to tell about the moonlight rides?
You tell
did you
about
want
those.
We had a wonderful stable in Kinston, and we had, whenever there was a full moon in the spring or summer, we would go on long. In fact, everyone in the stable would come, and we went on very long moonlight rides. We'd have dinner or supper really beforehand at the stable, and then begin to ride. And we were riding down dirt roads and through the woods, and it really was an idyllic childhood. We have had a love affair between the two of us for so very many years. Absolutely love this lady and have, and I think maybe it's mutual.
Likewise. I was in Roland and Stuart's wedding, and that was a happy memory to me. And then she ended up having a baby at the time we were married, so she couldn't be in my wedding. But I was alone for about 5 years. I was divorced, and that was a poignant time between Roland and me. It was a very sad time in my life. I felt like my world had crumbled, and Roland found out about it, and she called me on the phone, and this was when I was really down, and she said, "Hunnis, I've just heard of what's happened in your life, and I've made a plane reservation, and I'll be out there next week." And I was just dumbfounded. That was a long way for her to come. But it just, to me, was a highlight of a friendship that someone would do that. Her daughter, Roland, was married, and I came to the wedding here in Charlotte, and then the time came for her to throw the bouquet. And at the Charlotte Country Club, there's a balcony, and the brides take the bouquet up there and throw it out into the ballroom, and somebody catches
Usually
it.
to the bridesmaids.
To the bridesmaids. Well, all of a sudden, here was this bouquet coming to me, and little Roland, I knew what she was up
She
to.
purposely.
And I dropped it. I mean, I just wouldn't pick it up. I wanted the bridesmaids to get it. So somebody picked it up, took it back to the balcony, and I just all of a sudden looked up there, and she was winding up like a pitcher at a ball game and threw that thing straight at me, and I caught it. Here, this old lady among all these darling bridesmaids. And do you know that an old friend from years and years ago who had lost his wife, well, it wasn't long after that we reconnected and we married, and it was 25 of the happiest years of my life.
It's hard to really express how very special the relationship has continued all these years, and it truly has become more so.
It really has.
There is a bond that will never be able to be broken. I might do something that might aggravate her on occasion, but
and I know I do.
She doesn't let me know that. But I have absolutely loved being with my best friend all over again.
It's just amazing what life holds for you when you're not even, it's out of your control. And here we were, as we say all the time, we were pushed in strollers together, and now we're out to pasture together.
I was down having lunch one day, and I sat across from a lady whose husband was my tennis partner who passed on. But there was a lady next to me that I had not met before, but so the two ladies crisscrossed were talking. And I saw that beautiful smile and a twinkle in her eye, and I said, boy, I'd like to meet her. So 2 nights later, I called, and she said, oh, I'd be happy to. Well, come to find out that she lost her husband about the same time I lost my wife, and that we had a lot in common. Well, what we had in common seems to be growing every day, and we got engaged. This young lady inspired me to do something I never thought I would do, because it meant meeting a new lady to continue my life with, which I'm enjoying each and every day.
I came to Southminster because my husband was not doing well, and after we'd been here about 3 years, he died, and I never thought I would go out with anybody else again. You know, I thought I was beyond the age when that would happen. So when this handsome man sat down next to me at lunch one day, and he was so funny. He was telling us, my friend Beth and me, the story about how he proposed to his wife, and how that turned out, and it was just hysterically funny story. So when he called me a couple of days later and said, would you like to have dinner with me? I thought, well, sure, you know. And so he said, I'd like to get to know you better. And that was almost a year ago, and now we're planning a wedding.
Now, for years, you taught kindergarten.
I did.
How many years did you teach kindergarten?
A lot. I started out to teach 12th grade English because that's what I really loved. Mm-hmm. But you can't teach 12th grade English when you have 2 little boys at home and a husband. So then I started filling in, and it was such fun with kindergartners that I just decided, then the lady in charge of Mecklenburg's student teachers used to come to the church. This was before they had public school kindergarten. And I was helping out there because my boys were both in school. And she said, if you ever get your teacher's certificate, move it from 12th grade English to kindergarten, I'll hire you that day. So I thought, well, that's a good idea. So I did. And it was wonderful fun, but I think I learned more than I taught, maybe.
Now, if memory serves me correctly, you taught with another resident of Southminster, am I right, at one time? Or is that incorrect? Did you teach with Edith?
No, we taught at the same time, but she was a Baptist and I was Presbyterian.
Oh, okay.
And never the twain. I used to go by the Myers Park Baptist Church because they had a great kindergarten.
Right.
And Edith, who was my neighbor.
Yeah.
And I liked what they did, so I'd go by in the afternoon and take notes and see what they were doing so I could copy them.
And then, as it turned out, you both ended up here.
We did.
She moved here,
We did.
and you're here.
She was here when
so
I got
what was it like for you to live at Southminster and kind of be among some old contemporaries, if you will? When you, yeah.
It was wonderful because we had lost touch. We were together. When she got to be president of the PTA, she made me come help. You know, I was co-president or something. But we worked together a lot. And when my husband was very sick, she got me into meet and greet, which she was the head of. And all of a sudden I was working with that and Edith, which was a treat. One of the greatest stories was after the first September that I was in the public schools. I was over in Billingsville, which is right across the road from the Mint Museum, that school. And we had to get the children ready. There was a tornado warning. And of course, this was right after the beginning integration of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. And so we had to get people on the bus and, you know, try to get everybody home before the tornado was to hit. Well, there was never a tornado. It was the weatherman, a little nervous. But we did dismiss school a little early. And the next day, you know, I was hesitant when I went into teaching because I'd never worked with children. And this particular school had busloads of children from Vietnam, and then we had the orthopedically handicapped children. So it was more an education for me than it was for the children. But when that tornado was over, the alert was over, they came back the next day. And there was a shiny-faced little girl sitting right on the floor in front of me. And I said, oh, I'm so glad to see everybody's home and everybody's back safely. And this little girl held her hand up and she waved it. And I said, Tanette, what did you have? What happened to you? What do you? And she said, well, I didn't even need to worry because my mother, and her mother taught school at West Charlotte, and I knew that. My mother told me that tornadoes always suck up all the white people first, so I didn't even have to worry. I said, shoot, Tanette, if you'd told me that, I'd have gone home sooner.
And speaking of the chapel, how about share the experience that we experienced together pertaining to Terry and Amanda?
I am delighted. It's one of my favorite stories. Every Wednesday, there is an Episcopal Holy Communion at Southminster. And one Wednesday, a lady priest from Holy Comforter was here giving the sermon and delivering the Eucharist. And this tall, dark-headed man snuck in the back and nobody paid him any attention, really. And when Amanda got through, she went out to greet people, and he interrupted her and said, my name is Terry Robertson. I have a funeral service, and occasionally we have emergencies that we need to take care of here at Southminster, and I have one right now. and everybody's awed as to what is the emergency. And he dropped down on one knee, reached in his pocket, and pulled out a ring and said, "Amanda, will you marry me?" And she was flabbergasted. Everybody was flabbergasted. And Joanne told me, one of our residents says, "Oh boy, all of us are going to get to be bridesmaids," because we were here for the opening. And they were married about a year later, and now are expecting their first child.
And I remember some of us who saw that went to the wedding.
Yes.
And that wedding was, I've been to many a wedding, but that wedding was one of the most beautiful, powerful, moving weddings I've ever been to.
Mine too. But another thing that I wanted to mention about volunteers here, when I came here 5 years ago, my wife and I, Dr. Jim Tart, a retired OBGYN, had started a program where volunteers from Southminster would go to the men's shelter on Statesville Avenue every month and serve dinner to homeless men. And on those days, 5 years ago, we were serving 150 to 175 meals every night. And every third month, Southminster's Kitchen would provide the food to take there. And we would serve our own food, the food that we eat here. And it was always so wonderful. And when the men knew that it was the third month, we served an extra 15 or 20 people every time because they wanted to be there for that meal.
Okay, what is your name? We can start that way.
No, we're not going to say my real name.
No, I said Kay.
Kay, okay.
She had a different name.
Gail.
And we grew up as little tiny children together on the same street. You were there before I was.
I was there first. I was almost
You
born
were born
there.
And we played paper dolls. Your memory's better than mine, so you...
Yeah, we had paper dolls, and then sometimes we'd get the better ones that were thick.
Yeah.
You know, you could get, I think...
Cardboard, heavy, heavy cardboard.
You could get little, I think it was about $10 for a little book of just regular paper dolls. But then when it felt really splurged to get one of those
on
thick
birthdays
ones.
we got them, maybe good.
And they had little clothes, you know, that you could cut out. And they had, I remember I guess it was like the movie stars, or it wasn't, and they'd have these cute little outfits, so they had cute little shorts. Do you remember that?
No, you remember more than I do. And how old were we when the polio quarantine was in effect?
Well, it was in grammar school.
Oh, we were, it was young.
Yeah, I guess 8 or 9.
And that whole summer we couldn't go out. We had couldn't go to church.
I don't think so.
No,
and of course it broke my heart that the pools were closed.
Yeah, but we had little plays and
had 2.
What were they? I don't.
Sleeping Beauty. I don't know who played Sleeping Beauty.
Well,
had that on your front porch. Then we put on Rumpelstiltskin.
Okay, I do remember that. Was that down at
the Kimmelstills?
I was going to say Dr. Kimmelstills.
On the terrace, you know.
Yes.
And I was Rumpelstiltskin.
Okay.
I don't know what you were, but you might have been Sleeping Beauty back there. I don't know.
In a different show.
Yeah, in the first one. And so we took up money and we gave it to the Red Cross.
Weren't we nice
Weren't
little
we,
children? Yes, I don't remember that.
Yeah, the second one.
Your memory is just unbelievable.
No, well, I do remember that. Well, you know, I got mad because they weren't fixing the sets like I wanted them to. And we had a book that had, you know, pictures. Oh, Lord. And so, I wanted us to have it exactly like the book. Yeah. Rumpelstiltskin had a red crown, and I painted it, and it didn't get dry, and it stuck to my hair.
And the only time I have ever been in a fight, and it was a hands-on, hair-pulling, biting, spitting. It was awful. Both of us really going at it. And her mother, that little French lady, Miss Kennedy, came out and turned the hose on us. And that was the end of that fight.
you don't remember the Wolf's backyard, but there were neighbors, and she's here.
Yeah, Anna.
Anna
Dameron.
is here, Anna Dameron. And her father was with Duke Power Company. And he built a tower on the back of his house that went up a story above the second story. And they did not have a stairs, they just had an elevator. Little bitty,
Just an elevator.
Just a little bitty elevator. And so Anna's younger sister and I were friends, and so we'd climb up that tower just like monkeys. But they had a merry-go-round. But they had a wonderful backyard. They had a merry-go-round, which was a seesaw, you know, anyway, it was, I just think about how agile we were. Because you get, you know, when you push it around.
Compared to today.
Well, compared to any time. The person in the middle pushing it, the people who were on the merry-go-round, you would put her head down and would be just a blur, but we'd run out. And I mean, I'm not kidding, we had to have split-second timing to do that. And one of Anita's friends from across town tried to run out, knocked her down, and hit her head on a rock.
Joe and I, my wife and I, have been members of Christ Church since 1956. And I was on the vestry when 4 of the founders, I think it was Russell Robinson, Tom Stowers, and Stuart Dixon, and maybe Cliff Cameron, I've forgotten which ones, came to our vestry meeting to tell us that they wanted to start a retirement community. So that's the first I heard of Southminster. And we became members of the Compass Club very early, before it was known as the Compass Club. So we had an interest in it by virtue of our church's relationship to it. I was fortunate enough to be asked to be on the board, and I've spent 9 years on the board. First hitch was 6 years, and the second was 3 years. And when I moved here, I got off the board, even though they told me I could stay on. I thought probably someone else ought to have that privilege, but. So I was fortunate to be asked to be on the board, and I love being on the board. I was impressed with the executive leadership of Southminster. I mean, I think the fiscal and responsibility and integrity of the board and administrative leaders of Southminster was inspiring to me. Their integrity and honesty, and we had hoped to get this church property in about 2007 or 8, along about the time the recession hit. We had to back off at that time, and I think everyone tightened his or her belt and rode this thing out with a great deal of integrity, and I had a lot of admiration for that, still do. I will say this, one of my favorite stories I've told ad nauseum is at the height of the depth of the recession, someone on the executive committee suggested to David Lacey that he take a raise, and at that time everybody's salary had been frozen from top to bottom. And he said, you know, I'm not taking a raise until the lowest person on the totem pole takes a raise. There was a lot of integrity in that, made a great impression on me, and I still respect him for that very much.
Okay, well, the amazing thing is that we lived within 6 houses of each other on Scotland Avenue for a number of years. And here, we live probably farther apart than there, but we see each other more. And I think we've become closer since we've moved here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
So it all started with you moving onto Scotland Avenue.
1964. And Liz Hassler, she was Liz Herbert, lived across the street. And Rooney Robinson, who's now our mayor, she and her husband John lived down the street. She had 3 boys. Liz and Pinckney had 3 boys. We had 2. Trying to think who else. And the Dagenharts right around the corner. And of course they're here. Liz is now Hassler. She's in a cottage. And then we just, our husbands, well, good buddies too. There were no secrets.
Well, then Mary Irving moved in.
Yep.
Right after you.
We moved in May of 1965.
we had 3 boys, and they played basketball in the McBain's backyard and football in the Shanks' backyard. And I think Kim and I have shared bridge clubs and book clubs and carpools, and it was a wonderful life, and it continues.
And then you moved in.
Yes, we moved to Charlotte in 1970, and Susan, our 54-year-old daughter, was 7 years old, and our son, Ned, was 4. And moved right in, and here were all of these kids on the street, and the basketball, and our backyard. There were 3 yards that adjoined, and it was always the neighborhood football field. And that was back when kids weren't in organized sports, so they were there. And
the creek.
And the creek. Oh,
they
we
weren't
had
supposed
creek.
to be in the creek, but
They
they got in the creek.
They loved playing in the creek, and so there was always plenty to do. Now, Mary, I remember one time when we were out of town, and Ned had a big party, and Hugh was there, and so those kinds of things went on all the time. So.
And and we had a dog. The dog could just wander. Barney McBain wandered all over the neighborhood. Nobody worried about him. And that lady, Miss, know her name. The one who, her son was different. He rode the bike.
Miss Komorowski.
Miss Komorowski. She would call and report on Barney all the time because he'd bark at night when he'd go out and look at the moon, as beagles do. And so, even Teddy shot out our lamp one night. But the garage light, because I'd leave that on for Barney, because he just wandered around the house and shot that light right out. Barney came running in that house.
I'd like to talk about our first Sunday here when we walked in to eat, and we thought we'd like to join somebody, and we asked the lady at the podium if we were new and we could we eat with somebody. And she thought a little bit and looked around and said, well, and I saw this nice looking couple over to the right, and I thought, well, they look nice. And I said, could we eat with them? And she said, well, they're a little picky, but maybe we can find somebody, or we can ask. And I said, oh no, let's not do that. And then this little voice behind us spoke up and said, well, I'll eat with you. And it was Margaret Summerall. And she took us by the arm and led us through the lunch, and we had a wonderful time with her. And that was our first opening to Southminster with people that we didn't know.
We had the good fortune to be asked by Cliff Cameron to join his Monday night dinner group, which they call the Huh group. That's huh. It's like you put your hand up to your ear and say, huh? Well, that was our group.
Because everybody was deaf.
Well.
Particularly EJ.
But we had Lola McMillan, Cliff and his wife Sarah, Huppy Snyder, Liza. It was a great group, and Lola was such a character. And Huppy was,
my favorite.
I guess, she was the first woman to be married at Southminster. She and George Snyder were married here. Huppy had a good life, but she was a grand gal, and we enjoyed her over the years. That group has continued, even though all of the originals are long gone. In the meantime, Shirley Benfield joined us, and Shirley was someone that I had known since we were in grammar school, and we went all the way through high school together, and then became friends again when we came back to Charlotte in 1958. And she and her husband, Bob, moved in here later, as did...
he was our dentist.
Yes, that's right.
The family.
And then also Julia, well, she had been Julia Upchurch as we were growing up. And then she married and became Mrs. Alexander. And she and her husband, Ralph came in.
It was wonderful.
Yep.
He was
An interesting guy.
Oh, he was
a salesman of the first order.
So much.
But we've had great fun here. So many happy times. And of course, sad times too, as we lost friends over the years, which is just a part of life that you have to understand when you come into a group of senior citizens and know that we're not all going to be here forever.
Do you have favorite spots that you're enjoying throughout this beautiful community?
Yes. Well, one of my favorite places is the chapel. I think it's just a beautiful little chapel. And it was very important for me to come to a place that had a chapel. And just walking by it is just a pleasure to look in. And of course the services are special. And then I love the grounds, and particularly the courtyard. I love to go out on a sunny afternoon and read a book in the courtyard. I think it's very quiet, and it's just special. Well, the library. Oh, that's one of my very favorite places. And I go down and I don't take the Charlotte Observer anymore, so I go down there and read the Observer as much as I can. And it's a wonderful library. It has marvelous books. So I like to go down there and sit, and on a cold, rainy day by the fire, there couldn't be any place more delightful. Several people that I went to high school, even junior high school, are here. So that is fun. Go back, remember, do you remember so-and-so? And do you remember who he married? It's just a lot of fun. And when you have tables, people like that, you just have so many stories that you remember. If anybody asked me, I would say, well, this is just a wonderful place to be. Nothing's perfect, but it's near that way, of what they do for the people who live here.
Jim Tice, my husband, was chair of the Board of Deacons at Myerspark Baptist Church. And one night he came home from a meeting that had been held at Christ Church. And a group had gotten together that had a particular interest in creating a different kind of retirement facility and nursing facility that might accommodate not only themselves, the people who wanted it in the latter years of their life, but particularly for their parents. Mm-hmm. Their parents were aging, their parents were still at home, but there seemed to be no place for those parents to go to sustain the kind of quality life that they had had. Mm-hmm. And so the dream of Southminster was developed, though it didn't have a name at that time. As the plans for this facility got underway, the bank required that we raise, I guess, some good faith money. But $1 million had to be raised by the two churches to ensure that we were committed to following through with these plans. And so Jim and I both participated in contacting people about that earlier seed money.
Wow.
So volunteer effort for me goes back to the very beginning.
That's amazing. And that was a lot of money, $1 million.
That was a lot of money back in the early 80s. Yeah. Certainly it was. And then I was delighted, not too long after Jim died, to have been called and asked if I would consider serving on the board. It was the greatest honor for me to do that. And I had such a good time working with you and working with David and working with all of the members of the board. That was the early stage of planning for the expansion. And my funniest story connected with the expansion itself had to do with getting the loans that were issued from the bank. And at that time, as secretary of the board, I got to go with David downtown and sign all those notes.
Oh my gosh, I remember that.
And
it was literally paper, many papers.
Signing all of that. And so during the downturn, I called Tate Bowers one day and I said, I need to check with you about something. Is the board insured for those obligations that we signed for?
Gosh, the recession.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. We made it through.
We made it. Oh, did we ever make it through and so beautifully? I knew that this is where I wanted to be. I had not planned to come quite yet, but my second husband was ill, and we knew that we needed to go ahead and make the move. And so he actually moved ahead of me and was in healthcare for a while. So I tell people, I really came in through the back door as a resident of Southminster because I experienced the stellar healthcare services that we have here. My own sense of being in the right place was really firmed up through my experiences in watching the quality of care that
so
Harry
nice.
received. Yeah,
that's so nice. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that is a wonderful testament to life here at Southminster. Thank you.
Life goes on beautifully at Southminster. I tell folks that I'm the proverbial bug in a rug. I am so happy here.
So it's so much fun to be here at Southminster finally with you and Ed. It brings back childhood memories, having grown up in Greensboro with Ed, and our parents being such good friends who traveled together and partied together and just enjoyed each other so much. And I remember that Ed was always a prime candidate for a date for a dance because he was cute and he was tall. And not very many of the boys were tall back then. And then I remember when I was headed to Chapel Hill in junior year, I heard that Ed was dating this most attractive girl from Gastonia, and I couldn't wait to meet her. And lo and behold, it turns out that we joined the same sorority.
We're all here and in such a caring, wonderful community, surrounded by friends.
Well, I'm Stuart Dixon. I'm a Charlotte native. Lived here all my life except for school, the Army, and a couple of years in New York. And Dick Brigden.
Yep, I'm Dick Brigden. I moved to Charlotte in the very early 80s and worked for a major corporation, Ruddick Corporation in Charlotte. I was the CFO, and as a result, did get involved in Southminster in the early days. Actually, prior to the construction, Stuart, who's here, asked me to sit on a committee with Tom Storrs, who was the initial chairman, to oversee the investments of the money prior to construction. So I saw Southminster from the very early days.
I was chairman of Ruddick Corporation, so I guess I had a little bit of influence on it. But basically, going back to the early days, before Dick was involved, before I was involved, two churches, Christ Church, Christ Episcopal Church in Charlotte, and Myers Park Baptist Church, had a group of people in each church who were exploring the possibility of some type of retirement home for their congregation or congregation family. Charlotte was unique, and it had 2 or 3 very good retirement homes, but not nearly enough for the demand. And so we had a committee formed. I was placed on it. I happened to be a deacon at the church at the time. Christ Church formed a committee not
any connection at the same time. Tom Stores was on it, and they made him chairman. And we found out both of us were working on the same thing, and we also found out that the financial impact of building a retirement community would be beyond the real reach of either one of those churches, but maybe together we could do something. So we had a joint meeting of the committees, and then to our surprise, found that North Carolina had gotten tired of people opening up a retirement home, and they're having to subsidize part of the occupancy, and they were running out of money, so they passed a law that said you cannot be licensed unless you have a sponsoring organization of at least 1,000 members. Well, we said between the congregation of the two churches, we meet that, so why don't we do it together? And we went to the Board of Vestry at Episcopal Church and Board of Deacons at Myers Park Baptist. They both approved, and we had a joint committee assigned the project of trying to come up with some type of retirement home. Land was, of course, the biggest problem to begin with, other than money. And there was not a lot of vacant land of size in southeast Charlotte, except some owned by the Harris family. So Tom and I went to see Jimmy Harris and met him in his apartment at 5 o'clock. He offered us a drink and said, "Now, I know what you two are about, but I want to tell you right now, I'm a Presbyterian, and I know the Christ Episcopal Church and Myers Park Baptist Church have both got plenty of money. So don't come in here wanting me to give you any land." We said, "No, we're not. Well, we'd take it if you would, but we're not asking that. But we're asking a chance to buy a piece because you have the only sizable pieces of land in where we want to be." Well, we negotiated and talked a while, and he finally said, "Well, I'll tell you what I will do. I'll give you a cousin's price." So he sold us the land we sit on now at probably 10% less than he could have gotten market-wise, or maybe more than that if he had developed it. And we had the land. It's been a labor of love. I've enjoyed being around it and seeing it. Get exasperated every now and then during the early days. But Tom was a wonderful fellow. I'm sorry he's not here now because he could add so much to what went on. I'll never forget we had some discussion about something that he said, "Well, don't let the inmates have anything to say about it." We said, "What?" He said, "Well, they're inmates. We're running it. They're not." He was a wonderful chairman, and he stayed chairman, I guess, for, I can't remember, 15, 20 years, 15 years anyway, I guess.
One other individual I'll remember, well, two individuals I'll remember that spent a lot of time with CC, and when I was involved more directly as the chairman, we did have a number of issues dealing with the state, and CC was always the man to go to Raleigh and kind of help out. He seemed to know his way around there very well, which I think over the years benefited.
Now you're talking about CC
Cameron.
Cameron, yeah, Cliff Cameron.
Cliff would be the guy who would go to Raleigh, come back a day or two later and say, "Yep, I think we'll be all right on this one or that one or what have you."
He was the chief executive officer of First Union, and looked forward to being here, and did come and become a resident, and lived here and died here. Was a great man, and he really, you're right, he carried most of the water, if you will, with the legislature, with Raleigh, all the politics, what have you, and did a great job of it.
And again, as I remember and reflect on it, I think Charlotte always had a little difficulty dealing at Raleigh.
Oh, yeah,
and that's why it was key.
My mother, who lived to be 112. I know everybody says, "You're it," yeah. My father died at 71, and she lived alone for 10, 15 years, and then came out here when the cottage lived in cottage number 1 for a long time, and then moved over in the big house, as Tom would call it, in the big facility, in the apartment, until she was 112, and really was part of the institution early on. Your in-laws were here for
Probably 6, 7 years.
7 years.
And when they moved into the big house, as such, they were the first residents on their particular wing or floor at the time. So they were very early residents and what have you, and enjoyed their opportunity to be here. So.
Tom had an overriding philosophy that everybody else joined in. He said, I think Charlotte is entitled to a fine retirement home. I don't mean one that is the best in the world and got all, I do mean one, though, that anybody would look at and say, this is really good. And I want to make a promise, and I want all y'all to do it. And the board all said, okay. I reminded the board of that not too long ago. We are going to be as fine a facility as is practical financially and socially as we can be, and have a family type arrangement, not a corporate arrangement where nobody knows anybody. And that spirit is pretty well held true.